Hello there, Hello there, everyone. Welcome to the channel if you're new. Welcome back if you aren't. I'm EDJ, and we are continuing with Historia Civilis' Caesar series. So now we are covering, the Rome's new political order after the fall of the Pompeians and Cato. Which I said last video, by the way, that I didn't like Cato. He came across as kind of like a petty ex-girlfriend that's just in it to hate Caesar. But I was a little like, obviously my opinion has changed now, mainly because I did my own off-screen research, and overall I don't hate Cato anymore. I think it's just the portrayals of him. He just comes across, but learning about him specifically, I don't know, I feel like my opinion has changed, and so I'm really happy about that, I guess I was a bit too influenced by pro-Caesarian propaganda. No, I'm joking. But you know what I mean. It's good that this series has motivated me to do historical research off-screen, because it gives me more perspective and more desire to learn about these very important figures. Like, for once, I didn't like Cicero. Well, that's a bit wrong. I didn't like Cato, but Cicero I was kind of like whatever about. I was like, who cares? It's just Cicero. But, upon learning a little bit about him and some of his accomplishments, I'm like, you know what? I kind of like Cicero. Like, overall, I feel like I'm, definitely learning a lot. And, yeah, overall, I feel like definitely, which is the main point of this kind of channel, which is for me to look up history and learn. So I do feel like these YouTubers are certainly educating me, and that I am becoming, overall more educated, I guess. So, yeah, I'm really liking this series. So let's learn about the new political order and what further accomplishments Caesar, did. So let's get to it. Without any further ado, let's watch Rome's new political order.
Over the course of the Roman Civil War, Julius Caesar spent about 4 years on campaign. In his absence, for a variety of reasons, the city of Rome descended into a prolonged political crisis. In order to fully understand the mess that Caesar left behind, we have to rewind a couple of years. After Caesar's victory over Pompey at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48, he sent one of his deputies, Mark Antony, back to Italy to oversee the political situation while he was gone. Antony immediately ran into serious problems. A tribune of the plebs exploited Caesar's absence by attempting to push a bill through the Senate that would abolish private debt. Debt abolition was a thing in the ancient world. It's complicated, but sometimes ancient societies would find themselves in a financial death spiral, where an ever-growing number of poor people would find themselves saddled with multi-generational debts. This was a growing problem in Rome at the time, and debt abolition was a crude but effective method of freeing up these people so that they could be productive citizens again. The aristocracy, as the holders of the debts, came out against the bill and blocked it in the Senate. That should have been the end of the whole thing, but instead, the tribune started going around and making impassioned speeches in front of growing crowds. Before too long, he was able to lead an angry crowd into downtown Rome and occupy the Forum. This tactic of taking to the streets wasn't totally unprecedented, but the speed at which Rome's political class lost control of their city was alarming, to say the least. This was a problem, but it was a problem with a clear solution, right? Antony was in charge and had an army sitting just outside the Pomerium. So obviously, he crossed the Pomerium and led the army away from the city. Hold on, he what? Yeah. He turned the city over to the angry mob.
Oh.
Do you think this is what Caesar had in mind when he left the city in Antony's hands?
I thought he was about to use the army to destroy the mob right there. I was like, well, brutal but effective. And then he just laughed. I was like, oh. that one caught me off guard. So, yeah, oh boy.
I imagine not. The likeliest explanation for this is that he wanted to send a message. I didn't mention this before, but the Senate got really bent out of shape when Caesar left Antony in charge, so much so that they actually tried to get him removed. Antony was, petty? Now that the city was in trouble, he wanted the Senate to beg him to intervene.
Oh my gosh.
But
he's like playing the role of Achilles right now. He's like, well, fine then, I'll just go here and sulk until you beg me to save you. I love the Iliad, by the way. I remember I read the Iliad when I was in like high school, like my freshman year. And I just really like the book. Sorry, I'm completely diverting. Let's get back to the main topic.
Things didn't quite go as expected. The mob began to openly bring weapons across the Pomerium, which was illegal, but who was going to stop them? They eventually started launching deadly attacks against their perceived enemies. Rome's political class became afraid to be seen in public. The city was basically ungovernable. Under armed guard, the Senate met at an undisclosed location and passed the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, or the Final Act. This legislation empowered the consuls to do whatever necessary to defend the Republic. It's important to note that although the Senate clearly had a plan, there were currently no consuls in office, and so it's hard to see how any of this would stand up in court. But before any plan could materialize, Antony returned in force and marched right across the Pomerium. These soldiers descended on the mob with swords drawn, and hundreds of Roman citizens were killed.
Yeah, that's what I expected for him to do the first time. He kind of delayed, obviously, and let the city fall into further chaos, but yeah.
This was the apex of pettiness. Antony deliberately allowed the situation to get out of control, and then needlessly butchered a bunch of Roman citizens. If Antony was disliked before, he was despised now. When the senator Cicero arrived back in Italy after the Pompeian defeat at the Battle of Pharsalus, a letter arrived from Antony telling him that he could not guarantee Cicero's safety and that it would be best if he stayed away from Rome for a while. This was highly irregular. Cicero was one of Rome's most influential politicians, and in case you missed it, this was a threat. Why? Because Antony didn't like Cicero, that's why. This blatant and unnecessary abuse of power hardly improved the Senate's opinion of Antony. But hang on, because it's about to get a lot worse. For starters, Antony just straight up stole Pompey's mansion in the center of Rome. One day it was empty, and the next day Antony had moved in. This was a giant red flag, because a generation earlier, the last civil war had ended with the winning side murdering a bunch of senators and stealing their property. Caesar had promised that this civil war would be different, but with Antony doing stuff like this, people weren't so sure anymore. Antony's behavior quickly got out of hand. He would show up for Senate meetings blind drunk, or would disappear for days at a time on wild benders.
Oh my goodness. Yo, like I mentioned before, I knew that Mark Antony mismanaged Rome, though the specifics are a bit, I wasn't too familiar with, but like, man, this man is just completely ruining everything. Dude, Caesar's tearing his hair out. He's like, oh, Antony, why? I gotta fix all of this. This man's wilding right now. But he's kind of based though. No, I'm joking. Mark Antony, he kind of like, learning about this makes me appreciate the HBO role more, because the actor kind of nails it.
I don't know if we should believe this or not, but there's one account that says that after butchering hundreds of Roman citizens, Antony thought that it would be a good idea to be carted around the city like a triumphal general in a chariot pulled by lions. This whole thing was made 10 times worse by the fact that nobody had heard from Caesar in like 6 months. People began to fear the worst. Some whispered that with Caesar out of the picture, they may have to take this Antony problem into their own hands. But Cicero was hopeful. He reassured his allies, writing, quote, "It seems to me that though Caesar is holding Alexandria, he is ashamed to send a dispatch of the operations there." Cicero was exactly right. A couple of months later, Caesar defeated the Egyptian army at the Battle of the Nile, bringing the siege of Alexandria to an end. After a brief detour to Asia Minor, the Senate received word that Caesar would be returning to Italy. The political class in Rome breathed a collective sigh of relief.
Man, Antony's so bad the Senate's happy to have Caesar back. How bad do you need to be? They hated Caesar. Wow. Even though they hated Caesar, you have to admit, Caesar's beyond competent, in terms of politics. I think Antony has his moments. He obviously made it really far in the final stages of the late Republic, so I'm not gonna say he's a complete moron. I think Antony certainly knew, when to make the right alliances, and mainly with Caesar, tying his bow with Caesar got him really far. But yeah, he has a lot of faults, and I'm not gonna deny that either. He's kind of a mixed bag,
Yeah. What up? We still doing this? I'm back. God, you guys. Hey.
When Caesar landed in Italy, Cicero was there to meet him. When they saw each other, Caesar ran up and gave Cicero a big ol' hug.
No.
As the retinue traveled inland, the two men hung back from the group and spent several hours lost in private conversation. I imagine Antony's name came up once or twice.
Oh, certainly.
Caesar made a point of avoiding Rome for the time being. He wouldn't be staying for very long anyways. The Civil War was still ongoing. This was just a quick pit stop to raise new armies, and then he was off again to North Africa. But he was still politically engaged, and when he received a full report from his allies back in Rome, he was not pleased. Antony was unceremoniously fired. Caesar had his allies in Rome call for elections for the coming year. Caesar was, unsurprisingly, elected consul in absentia. This was against the rules, but rules were mattering less and less as time went on. His consular colleague for that year would be a politician named Marcus Lepidus.
Lepidus.
We know less about Lepidus than I would like, but from what we do know, he was a good administrator and a skilled politician. When Caesar went off to Spain...
Yeah, Lepidus is someone who I feel like kind of got... History hasn't remembered him too well, unfortunately. Usually just kind of portraying him as either like an incompetent mess or an irrelevant loser, mainly just to be the third wheel between Antony and Octavian. Unfortunately, yeah, I think Lepidus kind of got screwed over by history, unfortunately, but, he obviously had accomplishment and, was a pretty important dude in Caesar's camp for a while, so... I also think he quelled some rebellions in Spain, so... Yeah, Lepidus had his accomplishments. Unfortunately, he just was stuck in the middle of this great eternal strife. We know with Octavian and Antony and all this, that he kind of just got shooed away, or ignored by people. And that kind of sucks, unfortunately, yeah.
Spain at the beginning of the Civil War, Lepidus had overseen Italy without incident. After Caesar's victory in Spain, he picked Lepidus to serve as one of Spain's new governors. As governor, Lepidus surpassed all expectations. A medium-sized rebellion flared up. Lepidus moved quickly and was able to defuse the whole situation without losing a single man. This was exactly the kind of gumption that Caesar was looking for. Unlike Antony, Lepidus didn't need any adult supervision. When Caesar tapped Lepidus to be his co-consul for the year 46, he unmistakably became Caesar's new number 2. It's worth noting that Antony, who a second ago had been the most powerful man in Italy, would hold no elected office.
Wow.
The Senate then turned to Caesar and named him dictator for a year. The dictatorship was an emergency measure that temporarily gave a person absolute control over the Roman military, as well as the ability to override political vetoes. This would give Caesar plenty of leeway to wrap up the civil war. The office of dictator came with a deputy who was called the Master of the Horse. Caesar nominated his co-consul Lepidus to be his Master of the Horse, and empowered him to act on his behalf while he was on campaign in North Africa. For Lepidus, this was a massive vote of confidence.
Dang, Lepidus is rising through the ranks, dude. So yeah, he's just rising right now, and Antony has just kind of been completely shooed away. So, oh man.
Consider for a moment the pickle that Caesar was in as he prepared to leave for North Africa. The regime had never been more unpopular. On one hand, he couldn't really afford to spend any extra time or money in Italy. But on the other hand, any further political deterioration might be catastrophic. The plan that Caesar came up with here is just so next level. You just have to step back and marvel at it. The big hot button political issue of the day was the movement for the abolition of debts. We've talked about this. It was the justification for the recent street violence, and it was quickly becoming the rallying cry for anybody opposed to the status quo. Caesar injected himself into this debate by sending his agents all over Italy to the small and medium-sized cities that dotted the Italian countryside. These agents asked for meetings with the local aristocracy, and then, on Caesar's behalf, asked to borrow mind-boggling sums of money. War was bad for business, they said, and this loan would help Caesar bring an end to hostilities. When that was done, Caesar turned around and published a bunch of pamphlets in Rome that said something like, "Debt abolition would be awesome, but as Rome's richest and most indebted citizen, it would benefit me most of all. It wouldn't be fair." This was one hell of a switcheroo.
Wow.
Not only did public enthusiasm for debt abolition instantly dry up, but it no longer made sense for Caesar's political rivals to rally behind a policy to which Caesar would be the chief beneficiary.
Wow. Holy crap. Oh my goodness, Caesar, you mad lad. Dude, this is why Caesar's great, because he thinks of solutions that I don't think anyone else would have. Like, who else would give themselves debt to win? I'm the richest, but also the most in debt, so yeah, by all means, dude, let's do this. And everyone's like, oh, we don't want this anymore. Dude. Caesar's a genius, man. The way he just comes up with solutions to so many problems is just amazing, man. Yo, I'm shocked right now. Just those solutions, man. Caesar, I'm telling you, the man can do it all. Politics, warfare. Like, he is one of the most dangerous people because of just how competent and intelligent he is. And, like, I'm just always shocked by the creative solutions that he comes up with to get out of problems. In a way, I haven't been impressed with anyone else. Caesar has impressed me, so dang, man. Just talk about masterful, man. Masterful move.
But here's the really genius bit. It's a bit of a long walk, so pay attention.
Okay.
Every year, 20 new politicians gained lifetime membership to the Roman Senate. These politicians were the people who had just been elected quaestor. Quaestors were elected through a body called the Tribal Assembly. Now, the Tribal Assembly was sharply skewed, in today's terms you might say gerrymandered, in favor of rich people from the Italian countryside, at the expense of poor people from the city of Rome. And what do we know about rich people from the Italian countryside? They had all loaned Caesar all of their money. What did this mean? It meant that every candidate for quaestor had to answer a very simple question from the most powerful part of their electorate. Are you going to help Caesar end the civil war? Yes or no? With this one move, not only did Caesar defang the movement for debt abolition, but he established a new set of political incentives that churned out an annual crop of young senators that basically shared his policy goals, or at least pretended to. It really was an inspired bit of business.
Wow.
When Caesar departed for North Africa,
Dude, the dude just showed up and just immediately ended the biggest problem like it was nothing. My goodness, man. And he always finds a way to not only solve a problem, but to benefit the most from it. Man, dude, Caesar, like, I come here to praise you, Caesar, not to bury you. Like, you know? Dude, I'm shocked. I'm sorry. That was genius. That was like 5D chess right there. The man is playing 5D chess, and everyone else is playing like checkers or something. I don't know.
Africa, he left behind a Rome that was under new management. Unlike Antony, Lepidus took his job seriously and was careful not to alienate the Senate any more than absolutely necessary. After some pretty lengthy delays due to weather, he was able to send 4 additional legions to North Africa, which played a pretty big role in Caesar's eventual victory over the Pompeians at the Battle of Thapsus. But Lepidus's competence couldn't fix Rome's underlying problems. For years, whenever Caesar had been faced with a difficult political problem, his response had been the same: after the Civil War. Well, the Civil War was now over. When Caesar returned to Rome in the summer of 46, he faced an angry populace, an embittered political class, a disgruntled military, and, oh yeah, a truly ludicrous amount of personal debt. To make matters worse, the Civil War had proven that Rome's political system was thoroughly broken. This was now Caesar's problem, and it would prove to be intractable.
Yo, that was awesome. I just love watching Caesar, you know, work. Like you can see why a lot of people still admire Julius Caesar, you know, at least in terms of his skill. Just, the man's a political genius. He's a military genius. He's just a genius overall. His IQ is next level, man. So overall, I really love learning about how Caesar overcomes political situations, because he does it with such finesse and skill. He makes it look easy. That's the thing. Like, Caesar makes problem solving look easy. Like, just, again, I'm in awe of the man. Nothing but praise and just admiration for his skill. And I'm really just looking forward to more. I'm binging a lot of these videos because I can't stop myself. I need to watch it all, you know? So I'm gonna jump to the next one and see how Caesar continues tackling these problems. So I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, everyone.